question. Yes. Also, permission to record. We promise you we're not taking you to DCI. We just want to share this recording with you later after this session for you to play it out with your colleagues, or if you, for people who are not able to join us as of yet. But feel free to let me know in the chat if you have any questions or anything. I will be supporting Mark as his buddy this afternoon. Mark, back to you.
Thank you. Yes, good morning. That would be to you, I guess, Arik, and good afternoon to everyone else here in this East African time zone. We're really excited to have this webinar with you. We've been preparing it for some time now, and I'm really excited to have a number of my teammates here with us as well. Very encouraged with just the numbers of folks who've signed up. And so just to respect your time, we're actually going to start on time, and I'm going to fire up the slides. We've got a number of really great things that my teammates and I have worked on to really just help get you informed, involved, and really just better prepared for when some of these crisis situations may catch us. So I'm going to just get to sharing my screen. We're going to have a Menti a little later that we're going to do together. We're also going to have just various ways we'll ask you to engage with my teammates and I using the chat. And so please don't be shy or don't be afraid of that if we ask that of you, just like Ruthie did. So thank you to the few of you who've actually been able to tell us this so far. I am going to, just get us fired up here slide-wise. And we will be sharing a recording of this session, the slides, and I have a special AI resource that I am looking forward to sharing with you towards the end of the call. I really just, as you'll come to see, just have a number of ways we're investing and working with our clients to really help them take advantage of state-of-the-art AI tools and platforms, still while keeping what we call a human in the loop, still while maintaining a sense of control and a sense of clarity. So I'd say that's sort of like our particular focus, is making sure we don't lose out on this aspect while still embracing AI. So allow me to get us started. And like Ruthie said, if you are like our good friend Arik dialing in from another country, please do let us know in the chat. That'd be really great for us to know. Let's not assume that we are all here in sort of the Nairobi or Eastern time zone. So just fidgeting and getting around. So we also have the Q&A, by the way. So if you do have a particular question, I know we asked a number of you coming in, at least some of you, just what your questions might be. So if you do have some, do let us know. But I'm going to just get us fired up here. And I'll just ask you a quick confirmation, Ruthie, that you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen, Mark.
Super. All right, so from crisis to confidence, that's what we're talking about today. We have a number of just different perspectives we hope to give you to thinking through crisis. We are not a crisis communications firm, but we have been called in. Yeah.
Just a quick one, just make sure it's on full view. We can see all your screens. So we can see your speaker notes.
Okay, so you can see the full screen, not just the window.
Yeah.
Lovely. So let me just check on that 1 second. So we'll share just the screen here for our window. Thank you. Go again and comment. I'm looking for comment. Let me see if that's going to share it. But yes, it is. I see the green loop. So that should be it. Thank you for that. Yes, so like I've said, from crisis to confidence, that's really our hope today. We hope to challenge, hopefully, your thinking and perspective on crisis and get you thinking about it in new and different ways. We have a way I'll be desiring to get to know you a bit better. For some of us who are able to stay, we will go until about 2:15. You're welcome to leave at 2 sharp, but if you can go with us until 2:15, you're welcome to stay. I'll just give a quick summary of us, and then I'll dive right into the material. So this I'll save you because this is what we're going to send over. But Nendo has been around 10 years. It's an exciting journey for us since 2015. We've had hundreds of engagements with different clients across 20 African countries. And if you are a member of our letter and newsletter yesterday, you would have received an update from us set by my teammate Cynthia. And we're just talking there about the fact we now have a global project where the Philippines and Vietnam and places like Peru are going to see Nendo's work actually come and experience and meet people there. So that's exciting for us. We're based in Nairobi, but we have Pan-African ambitions and global South aspirations in the work we do with clients all over the world. Really for us, what we get really excited about is one, discovering the problem. So that's why we do webinars like this. Not only is it like something we do, just training and working with teams, but it's saying what's the better way to understand what we're seeing. So I hope to provoke you with some perspective on that. And then we get into sort of more of strategy and thinking assignments, followed by what we call more solution oriented consultancies. And then there's some people who just say, hey, I have a brief, I need creative, I need this many focus groups, get people together. But we love the problem solving that comes upstream with just being able to think critically with our clients. I mentioned our Pan-African perspective this year, working in places like Burkina Faso. I mentioned some of the international places, Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and elsewhere. And so always excited when we get the chance from our Nairobi base to work with what we call our nomads. This is a network of freelancers, fellow agencies, researchers, strategists, communications practitioners, influencers, or influencer managers, again, all over the continent, solving some of the toughest challenges that our clients have. Different clients, big and small, from different sectors. So from banking, financial services, climate change, the lending space, pharmaceuticals, airlines, platforms themselves, global media organizations and local ones, multinationals, you name it. So we'll skip through that. But one thing we want to leave you with, hopefully it's a promise we'll live up to today, which is that you can expect that we're going to give you what we call trends, predictions, and things you won't hear anywhere else. We take a lot of pride, I think, in making sure that the insights we're presenting are not just fresh, but provocative, things that you might be having in the back of your mind, but you haven't seen put together in that way. And so we hope to use our session today for that. Like I've said, we have the chat going, and Ruth is going to get my attention if there's something there to speak to or to connect on. But yes, there's also the Q&A. So the Q&A also gives us a chance to speak and engage. So feel free to use that as well. So we'll dive right in. I mentioned that we'd have a mentee or just a chance to hear from you. So I'm going to give you a second, if you would be so kind, to just scan this. It's just a handful of questions. I have information. I have the playbook that you came for, but I find that I'll be able to serve you a lot better based on our experience and that of my teammates to know a little bit about you. So if you just take a second to scan this, I think it would be great. It would really help my teammates and I. And that's what would help us to sort of go through it. I have it open in this next sort of area, so I will get to sort of presenting it. Ruthie, you'll tell me if this is not well, there we go. That's what I was looking for. I don't need both QR codes. Let me just get rid of that. So yes, so I hope we can see. So I have 9 of you, and we have well over 60 people on the call and rising. So want to leave a little room for you. We just want to hear from you. I also see some AI note takers, quite a number of them actually here too. I see some of our clients and partners here as well. Excited to have you all. And I see fellow agency folks. So this will be a chance for us just to get to know you ahead of the session and as we present to you. So I'm going to wait until we get maybe 30 people. We have 19 so far, but yes, just menti.com. And then you want to use the code 54729559. You can use your phone to do that. And yeah, I think we have the big 2. We have 20 people. So and rising. So I'll get us going. So we won't spend too long on this. But yeah, just help me understand, what industry are you from? So what industry are you from? You're just gonna tap the one that's closest to you. This just helps me see a bit of who we have in the room. Crisis means different things, as I'm going to tell you a bit later. I'll give a quick example because we've been really thinking this through for some time. So when we think through the concept or the idea around crisis, there's a few things I know for us as Nendo that we really think about. So one of them is around what we call the frequency of purchase, the frequency of purchase. So, for example, if I take a cab and I ride a taxi, for example, an Uber, Boda or Bolt or Little Cab, etc. If I have one bad ride, I'm going to be taking one in a few hours. I could choose to switch then. If I have a bad interaction with my bank, there's going to be a bit more friction in there as well. If I have a bad meal delivered to me by a food delivery service, that's going to be different to, even if I get, God forbid, food poisoning, that's going to be different to if I have some, of my mobile money funds go missing, or I really struggle to recover something there, or I have a fraud issue of some kind. So I see a lot of PR and comms. I see a lot of banking and technology. So this is the industry. I see airlines, which we expected, insurance as well, insurtech also, which is super. Now, tell me, for those of you who are here, what best describes your department? So some of you, I think, gave that away in the previous one, but just try and give me this again. So, and if you're just joining us, we're on our Menti right now. So menti.com, 54729559. Just doing a little exercise to sort of gauge who is here. So I see some PR comms folks. That was expected. And fellow PRSK members, good to hear from you if you're here. And thank you, Eric. Our leader at the PR Society of Kenya, who is here with us, as well as others who are representing among the membership. So interesting. Okay, so I did invite some public sector people because I didn't want to speak about, say, an e-citizen or some of those or SHA or SHIF without recognizing that they are in a very different space. I don't see any of them here, but I believe that I'll share the recording as well. So this is interesting and good to see. I believe I was probably missing the nonprofit sector from this, or rather, this might be department. So department is different. Let's move this a little forward. I'm going to get rid of our QR code there. So which describes your title. So what type of title do you have inside the organization? And we'll just go through this, and then we're going to fire up the rest of the slides, and that's what's going to take us through. So we'll have different places of where we sit. Some of us are what you might call at the front line. We're actually doing that direct interaction. Some of us are leading teams doing those interactions. Some of us are leading the managers of those teams. Some of us are directing the departments that have the managers, that have the teams, that have the frontline folks. And some of us, of course, are leading the organization in some capacity as well. And so it's always good just to see, because it just helps give a little bit of perspective. I see a couple of us still working our way through. So I'll give us a few minutes, and then I'm just going to pick up the pace here. But great to know that, we have both individual contributors, managers, senior managers, and HODs here. Now we get down to the nuts and bolts. So when is the last time you experienced a crisis? Yeah. So again, crisis is relative. If you saw any of the videos we had before our session, we know that the phrase crisis. All right, if that is you who said you had a crisis, I want to see how many people had a crisis that recently. So last 1 month, and so on. Quite interesting to see. Good to have some people who may never have experienced one. I know some of the people who had a crisis yesterday are gonna say, "Lucky you," or "Where do you work? I want to come join you there." But yes, crisis is relative, and it's interesting to just get a sense of this. But from what we're seeing, I'll try to unpack a bit more on this. Yeah. One thing I will say, just as we're thinking about this, is that we'll define sort of our 3Cs framework from Nendo on how we see crisis. We'll end this webinar giving you a chance to go through a form, fill it out, and that will allow us to pick up a conversation with some of you to just help your preparedness. But good to see here. So last 1 month, never, and yesterday, just for a couple of us here in terms of crisis. Now, when a crisis does happen, what is the first thing you, and I know there's some agency people here, or your client does? When a crisis does happen, what's the first thing that you do? Oh gosh, yeah, that English is not Englishing right there. So panic, bless your heart. Yes, panic indeed. Regroup, all right. Bring the band back together. I don't know if that is emotional, like get emotional. Haven't experienced one yet. Like you, hopefully you will learn by others. Ask for monitoring reports, smart idea, understand the problem, communicate, get details, gather the concerned people, very important. We'll mention and speak to that as well. Start firefighting, panic, or play wait and see, jump on a quick call. Pray, yes. That's always valuable. Panic and just stress. Well, my hope is that, again, by your time we at the end of this session, just from the support that my teammates and I will have prepared for you, that you'll be a little better prepared for it. So I know there's like a little fancy AI thingamajig. I have to just see if I can quickly. I am forgetting where it is again, but I believe what it can do is just, I might do this towards the end, but it'll sort of visualize a couple of these responses, get the facts as we go, regroup and come up with a plan, monitor the situation. That's fair. So keeping it moving, what channel contributed the most towards your crisis? And if you've not experienced a crisis, because some of you said that's the case, then which one maybe keeps you up at night? Which one concerns you? Which one do you suspect might be the place where it might bring a crisis of some kind? Crisis here being a reputational issue, calling it to question, colleague, executive, director, or senior person in your staff, the organization itself, or just somewhere or the other. Mainstream media often goes a bit underappreciated, especially now that mainstream media is taking a bit more of an investigative approach towards issues. Some people would say adversarial, like they are antagonizing, particularly the government. But I just say it's investigation, and there's always the right to reply depending on who you ask. But yeah, definitely for public sector colleagues, that's a challenge. So interesting. We're going to spend time talking about X. We have a number of examples that my teammate Adrian has prepared for us from X, and then we'll talk about ways to try to triage this towards the end. What's your best advice for dealing with an online crisis? You could keep it to a word or two. If you had to give advice to somebody else, what would you say is a way that you'd guide them on online crisis? This is you giving your perspective. And then we'll end with a couple of thoughts on AI, because something that my teammates and I have prepared for you today is an AI companion. So if you are seeing my screen, you'd have probably seen a bit of my back and forth in developing that. It's like a master prompt that you can feed in to whatever your tool or large language model of choice is. And what it's supposed to do is play a certain set of roles for you. So I'll end with a few questions to do with AI. So if this feels like it's running a bit, it's and then for those of you who've joined a bit late, I have asked if we can go until 2:15. If you do need to drop off again, we'll send the slides, the AI prompt that I'm going to show you, and the recording, and we'll do that this week by end of day Friday at the latest, just so you've got that. Yes, so best advice, hope it goes away. Respond and not react. Respond officially online. We're going to talk about that. That is one of our recommendations. Give it to the PR agency. That's right. Call on the experts. This is where they earn their bread and butter. That might be why you call them. Don't react out of anger. Absolutely right. Sometimes the internal emotional management is a big one. Stay silent and let it die down. That is true. There are some cases where it makes sense, depending on your institution, to be quiet, or there are certain things you cannot respond to because they're legal in nature or they're sensitive issues. So you need to sort of be silent, not because you might want to be, but because, yeah, you're mandated maybe from a regulatory place to do that. We had a couple different types of crisis. I will explain them here. There's the crisis of a colleague, crisis of a company, and crisis of a customer. I'm putting this here because what we're trying to see is, what crisis do you experience the most? I should have put other, because in some cases, like some of you have said, you haven't experienced a crisis. But if let's even just say this, maybe you can talk about the crisis you've observed the most, and that might help. And again, what this does, it just helps set me up for when we get to the slides, I'll be able to speak to you from a place of where I can speak to insights related to the area that you're most keen on, or that the most of you are actually experiencing the most of. I'll give a couple last few minutes for the last few people on the Menti to share. And for those of you, again, who've continued to join us, welcome. We're just going through this Menti, and then we'll dive into the slides, and then we'll turn to questions after that. So all clear, I've gotten to 20. So it's social media, you've come to the right place. Which of these statements resonates with you? So do you have a crisis comms plan? Whether you've experienced a crisis or not, do you have the plan? Secondly, have you updated that plan? Sometimes it needs updating. And thirdly, have you done a fire drill? Sometimes we'll hear about a mall or a physical location actually take people through an actual fire drill. They'll communicate it. Sometimes they do this for security reasons, meaning they need to check their ability to respond in a time of crisis, so to speak. So they will do a dry run that includes fire stations, various security personnel, and they will simulate what that looks like, and just so that the day that the actual, God forbid, situation happens, they aren't caught unawares. They're not caught flat-footed. They've learned in some way and prepared people for how to respond. So encouraging seeing some of these stats. And Ruthie, I know you're keeping your eye on the chat, so you let me know if there's anything for me to keep my attention or turn my time to. If you had a magic wand, and you could have your colleagues or clients, if you're an agency, respond in a certain way during a crisis, what would that be? If you had a magic wand and you could wave it, and I granted you not just 3 wishes, but 1 wish that would apply, what would that be? And then we'll get to our AI questions and close. I'm going to let 10 people answer this one before I move. And not to say you can't answer, please answer. I just want to quickly dive into our material as well. So stay calm, think straight, be less emotional, stay cool, calm, and collected. Calm as a cucumber. Breathe, yes. You'd be surprised. I've done this before. Sometimes breathing exercises are very, very slept on. And if you're not tuned into that, you have so much that you could do for your nervous system and your just by practicing and learning more about how to control your breathing, and it just has an impact on so much of our stress response as well. True. Yep. Sometimes you can overlook the crisis, ask to be quiet, and then pay a price for it. Let the professionals handle it. You're like, we've got people who pay for this, so let's have them work for it. Now, I mentioned AI because we're going to give you a resource that works with Copilot, DeepSeek. I'm going to talk about this as at the end of the engagement, and ChatGPT. So I just want to know a little bit on you and how you feel. And it might be that you have strong feelings against or for AI in the workplace. So just help me get a sense of that. So you're going to slide to the right if you agree with the statement. You're going to slide it to the left if you disagree. And that will just help us see, again, a bit of a sense of where we stand. So I'm going to let a few of us answer. I'm going to sip some water too. All right, this is super helpful. We're going to give you something called a JSON file. A JSON file is just a long string of text. You will paste it into whatever tool you use, and it will take on a certain role that Nendo is and follow some instructions to support you in a given moment and situation. So we're going to email that, and then we're also working on a larger beta. Beta means it's in a testing phase. GPT. So on the ChatGPT website, there's something called the GPT store, kind of like the way you have a phone and you have an app store. So within that, we have also another GPT that we want to demo. I might not demo that today. You might get that in the link, but you will see the JSON file today and something on that. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag in terms of just where but a lot of people saying here that that I think it'll help me do my job better. That AI agents can probably help me at work in my role, but sometimes it's been a bit mixed with how it worked out for you. Please, if you have a story to tell in the chat and you you won't risk incriminating yourself in some way, please tell us. It's a safe space, and we're keen to hear. I think this is my last question, which is, yes, in terms of frequency of use. So do you use it often? So is that once a week? Some of it might be once a day. It might be, just whenever, which might be once a month. And then have you used one when engaging with now your stakeholders? Those could be your colleagues, those could be your customers, those could be just stakeholders of whatever kind. And then has your organization invested? Has it invested in some way to equip you so you're not just using the free or personal version, you're using a paid version of some kind? I'm going to talk about 3 types of AI at the end of the presentation. I'm going to talk about social AI like Grok. I'm going to spend a little bit of time there. And then we're going to talk about AI for the workplace, which is largely Gemini and Copilot. There are others, but Gemini and Copilot and another one called Zia are the main ones. But yeah, good to see. Just giving us a bit of a sense here. If you're still on the Menti, please go ahead. Please feel free to fill it out. I'm not going to stop it. I'm just going to switch back to our content now, because that's given me some perspective that I can share. So let's unpack crisis for a second, and let's zoom out to just, before we get to the three C's, give you a view of how the team and I see sorry, Ruthie, you'll tell me if my sound is doing that thing when a call comes in. I'm
No.
okay. You can hear me?
Yeah,
All
we
right,
can
okay,
hear you.
perfect. So I'll just continue. Yeah, there's a lot I could say on AI, but what I want to start off with is just giving us some context for crisis. We've mentioned that it doesn't mean the same thing to different people. So the first thing I just say, and we're looking at broader trends, as you and I get older, and whether you are a Gen Z person who is again maturing in your workplace and role, or you're what we call a millennial or a boomer or whatever the age bracket you are, Gen Z particularly are redefining some of what we've come to expect and know about social media. So, firstly, content creation is being seen as a job, as a form of employment. That employment can come in a couple of different ways. One of them is through a revenue share that some of these platforms will give. TikTok has something called a creator fund. X, actually, which is formerly known as Twitter, actually pays creators based on engagement. And then you have others like Meta, which are now similar to YouTube and others, giving what they call a certain revenue split for the number of views and impressions you get. So people, even without that, people actually see content creation, particularly Gen Z, as a real job. And we'll talk about why this is important, because you're looking at people who see content creation as a part of their vocation. And that can be used in the corporate sense, because we feel that one of the most underappreciated, underinvested, underutilized parts within crisis communications is employees, staff. Some people call them staff fluencers. I think we've called them that before as well. And these are just content creators who actually are part of your team. They're in unexpected departments and places. So you don't always look to the marketers or look to the communications people. They could be in different places too. Next, I think just quickly on this, being a content creator or TikToker or influencer is tied for second with the ideal career choice for Gen Zs, right? So 1,300 people, 18 to 27, good representative sample by our friends at Odipo Dev and Africa Uncensored. And so there's this aspect of I might have work employment, but I want to be a content creator too. So I say that because on one hand, this means that yes, if the volume of potential crisis situations comes, and we'll talk about the motivations shortly, that could be just because people now are not just being online as consumers, they're being online with the intent that this is part of my career, this is part of my vocation. And so that's part of how I operate. Is I will review brands, I will review places I visit, I will review and create content about my life and lifestyle or topics that matter to me. In terms of what they're looking for in the workplace, it is money, number one, for Gen Zs at least, vibes, but vibes come after mental health, and so does company reputation. So again, why am I saying this? Because over the coming years, I'm trying to point you towards a phenomenon that says expect more people to have more to say about your organization, including the people that work there, whether you actually equip them to say that or whether they say that privately about your organization. Now, what do people care about? As far as Gen Zs, at least, health, cost of living, unemployment, corruption. And part of what I'm going to share as an insight from the 2024 finance bill protests is that there's been a bit of a shift or change over time that's seen now more people respond in a way that sees them turn their attention towards institutions away from the government. But I'll get to that in a bit. We did something with the banking sector last year where we helped develop a code of conduct for all the banks working alongside the Kenya Bankers Association. And this is a social media code of conduct, right? Because social media is competitive, it's interesting. And so what was interesting at the time, if I can switch there, was one, that a lot of the complaints here came from X. So just it's exactly what you've said in your Mentimeter, except this is like 3 times the number of people who featured and said this. So it's basically the live wire platform, and then Facebook, and then live chat, and then also there was that banking CEOs in particular seem to care about X significantly more than any other platform, and that's just financial services. So let's zoom out with the bit I was saying around the protest last year. So one particular perspective that's come out is that there's a point of view on what we call hostile activism, or what we call activist talk at Nendo, which is just ways that people are turning their data bundles, their minds, and their attention towards forms of activism related mainly to the government. However, as you're aware, there have been allegations of enforced disappearances, abductions, torture, killings, and multiple different issues that have come as a result. And so, to some degree, some people do not necessarily feel as comfortable to speak out against the government itself in this way. And so, what some are actually doing instead is they're pointing their time and attention towards institutions and brands. And so, what's happening is that the brands now are the ones who are actually experiencing a lot of a shorter leash, right, in the court of public opinion to defend yourself. So when there's a situation where there's an individual giving an accusation and against an institution, the public are going to sway this way, where they sort of shoot first, all right, or they challenge the institution first, and then seek to ask questions in a way later. And so even in cases where you know that this client or customer or stakeholder is wrong, you know that this story is a one-sided story, you know that somebody leaked something to this blogger and they went on to present only one side of the story, it's going to be difficult to get that right of reply in the court of public opinion. And this means we need to rethink how negative sentiment is perceived by us, because in Nendo's experience, it's gone up for everybody. So I say that because for some of you who work online, you deal with in some of the cases we talk a lot about what we call volume, the volume of mentions that are speaking about you, your products and your services. And so we have some clients who will be dealing with say 100 or less mentions a day. We also have some who are dealing with 7,000 or more per day in 24 hours. That's almost that's almost over 300 in an hour. And there's differences with both of them because it depends on the sector, right? So I'll give a quick example. Something like home internet, right? You pay for it monthly. So even if you have a couple bad days in between, the switching costs are a bit high. So the level of complaints while a customer still sticks with you is high. So you can expect to have a lot of complaints, but the customer might not switch. Whereas, like I said at the beginning of our call today, if it is something transactional, right, that's a lower cost, such as, for instance, I had an e-commerce delivery of a skincare item, or I had I took a ride with a ride hailing platform and the ride did not go very well. I didn't feel very safe. Then in those, like the switching costs, there's not as much friction in switching. I also think it's helpful for us just to think about the fact that this same audience, following the Gen Z protests of last year, is very open to having multiple providers of services. My grandfather, God rest his soul, worked for one employer his whole life, right? They don't make them like him anymore. Right? The same way I think that in some cases, we expect, oh, we're gonna have this one individual bank with us forever. It's not uncommon to have people be multi-banked. In other cases, it's not uncommon to have people have multiple SIM cards. Some things people can have multiple ones. They can have multiple streaming service platforms. But I say this because we romanticize this view of loyalty and people being, intensely connected to us. But as we're seeing in the court of public opinion with individuals versus institutions and hostile activism, you have a far more competitive landscape, even in terms of narratives, competing narratives. So when we think about what we call the 3Cs framework at Nendo, right? What do we mean when we say that not all crises are the same scope or scale or severity? That's a core part of the playbook. It's a foundational piece of understanding that we start off with. Whilst it starts off firstly with what we call the crisis of a colleague, this is typically either a senior person, right? So a senior person will approach you in your same organization and ask for information and ask for a status update or mention an upcoming change. And that can cause a bit of friction or tension. Internal communications is often overlooked and underestimated, but there can be crises related to strictly internal communications. There's also the crisis situation that speaks to my deskmate, my peer, somebody next to me. And some people say that your situation does not equate to my emergency. And so people might have different views on the same situation. That could be a crisis in some cases. And then there's what we call direct reports, people who report to you and them going through certain challenges. Now, why do you talk about this at all? Because many people say, Mark, you shouldn't care. You're an external service provider. Why do you care about the crisis of a colleague? Because when Nendo gets called in, like I said, we're not a crisis communications or fixer agency, but we do research, we do marketing, we do communications work, and we do training work. And so we solve pretty interesting challenges for clients we can tell if people are not together because of these different crises have worn down some of the trust and have created friction. So we like to speak to this, even though it's not the most popular one. Some of the most popular ones are crises related to business. And I'll show a couple examples here. I will say before I show the examples, I could have picked examples from anywhere. I'm picking public domain examples. I don't mean to target or isolate or put a target on any particular institution. Like I mentioned, we've done work with not just individual organizations in a sector. For example, banking, we've worked with the Kenya Bankers Association, so the industry and member-based organization. So we've seen multiple financial services providers. If I show one, please don't feel I can't show another. We could show them all, but we have an hour. So I'm going to pick a few. Same for telecoms, same for internet service providers, same for oils and lubricants, same for any of the ones I'll show, because I will show some. They're purely for illustrative purposes. They're all public information. And I'm not sharing any proprietary or client or confidential information from any of our interactions with clients serving them. It's purely for that basis. And it's a learning experience. Otherwise, I would show this slide and we leave it at the emojis. But my teammates did prepare a number of slides that have examples. And our objective is to teach and show. We said we're giving a playbook of resources that you can turn to from what you hear from today. And so the purpose of that's why we're doing it. So the crisis of a business is twofold. First, there's an internal element, which is when there's restructuring or layoffs or a court case, high-profile court case in labor court regarding an employee. Those can be crises related to a company or business that goes out to soil or sully the reputation of the institution. Then there's external. The media have a front page on you and a situation that happened, or an investigative piece around your organization, or it could be a particular customer has started some sort of class action or mobilization around an issue. And we can explain why as we'll get to it in a bit. Those are internal and external, crisis of a company or crisis of a business. Then the last and most common is crisis of a customer. Now there's spoken and unspoken. Unspoken means they vote with their wallet, they leave. The only way you find out is if you're looking at your churn rate, which is the number of customers who are active or have left engaging with you or your product, service, or experience. So that is one of the harder ones because they basically churned or left, but they've not explained the reasons why. And you find out after the fact, and they've made up their mind. Spoken is what keeps people up at night, but spoken is a gift, right? Because for people like us at Nendo, like I said, some of the clients we work with will have 6,000, 7,000 plus mentions going on a very, very interesting time scale about their products and services. So when you have that, you have an interesting pool of people's needs, of people's desires, of people's frustrations. And you have that of your competitors as well. So you have market intelligence that you can use, even though it will feel like many times like it's negative. As we've just come from explaining, part of that negativity comes from a sort of ripple effect of the Gen Z protests where while people cannot necessarily critique the government, they are holding institutions, that is nonprofits and philanthropies, that is corporates of many different kinds, it's service-based businesses of different kinds to higher standards. And so they continue to do that, even though in some cases they're not spending more. And then, of course, others will just come along for the ride saying, if you are being affected by an institution and you're an individual, I'm going to pick the David in this story every time and sort of aid and push and support them, even though I have no horse in the race or of course, in some cases, we'll talk briefly about what we call the keyboard warriors or hired hands who are there. So let's take a couple quick examples. And again, I want to be clear here, because sometimes I know I get messages of why did you choose us as an example? And so I don't mean anything by this. This is a webinar. This is not being live streamed on YouTube. It's a webinar, which is a sort of closed door event. So take that for what it is. In this case, I would say that Safaricom as an institution, you look at their share price, you look at their growth as a business, you look at a number of the initiatives they're leading. There's one side that says that this business is thriving, is growing, and is materially meeting a lot of its obligations. There are questions and concerns and allegations and suspicions, some of which are targeted either at the leadership or others that are targeted at the institution. And so in some cases, you could say that this is there because this is both external and potentially internal if we're trying to address some of these matters. And of course, as a publicly traded entity, there's been a lot of information related to this, from public statements to television interviews, and much more. So this is one of those stickier ones that it doesn't necessarily herald the same name of crisis, because in some ways it may persist for some period of time, at least to some audiences who will keep raising certain questions in the public domain. In terms of a company, what I'd say that is one of the differences here, you have a question here where it's basically, you'll see that this individual here, who is a blogger, and a particular type of blogger, in my opinion, who is certainly somebody who can antagonize some people, can upset some people. There are multiple bloggers. We have them on in a way, a sort of a special list to monitor, because reputationally, you just want to be knowing if they mention you, and you want that sort of skip the queue. And again, in some cases, people are direct messaging them with information. And so it's not just this gentleman, there's other gentlemen and ladies across different platforms, including Telegram and elsewhere, that will be getting information either from, like we said, insiders, where you have staff who will leak documents. They'll take a photograph of a document, they will send that there. And sometimes even, like we've said, the mainstream media will have an actual story where the call is coming from inside the house. So the information has come from inside the institution. Then you have what we call here the crisis of a customer. And then again, there are many instances of this. What you're just seeing here is that you have multiple people mentioning the institution without actually tagging them. And so this just starts a bit of that market intelligence in the court of public opinion. One big shift we've noticed is that there's also a much harder thing to track, which is a shift from text, like Twitter, to video. So when we were tracking a crisis earlier this year, when we looked to Instagram Reels, when we looked to TikTok, you find that it's in the actual phrasing, it's in what somebody's saying. So people are no longer just tweeting. Like now, in some cases, they are going there and they're saying, I got time today. I'm turning my front-facing camera on. That's why we started this session by explaining to you a bit about how Gen Z see this not as something I publish and share, but something where I am going to narrate the story. I'm going to center myself in the story as well. There's also the use of memes and even gossip platforms where you might have followed this, but there was some interesting data that showed last year during the Gen Z protests online that it wasn't the Nation or the Standard or Citizen or Royal Media Services online that was one of the main institutions where information was being spread, but a publisher who broadly goes by the name Nairobi Gossip Club. I'm not talking about like almost like 5x like difference in engagement. What does that say? That says that in some cases, your crisis can be made so much worse when it is reported in some of these gossip accounts and platforms. They are not newsrooms. They are not operating at the same level and the same style. And some of them will make video, or they'll make what are called carousels. These can be even harder to track. So we've worked pretty hard to make sure that we are able to sort of cast a really wide net, because that's where even agencies struggle, is with social media. As well, I'll show you when we get more practical, that's one of the areas where you can fall short. And when you do, it ends up really creating a challenge in how do you actually like tell the story and pass the information across to people. Yes, Ruthie.
Yes, Mark, I know we have quite a lean time. David Ngeru is asking, when you talked about bloggers, how does a brand deal with bloggers who basically greet companies using their influencer and platforms?
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that one. I think that one is the elephant in the room. I'd say you need to be really careful, right? In my experience, not all of them, but there are some who will seek out compensation to make a story disappear or go away, right? You can call that you could call that many things. Some people might call that extortionist slightly, or rent seeking. But the view here is that the question is down to the legitimacy of the claim, right? If it's a legal issue, if it's a material issue, if it's an issue that was going to leak out anyway. Sometimes I think someone said earlier when we did our Mentimeter that you do need to sort of watch, because sometimes they're touching on you, but they've got something else that they also want to speak to. Sometimes there are dozens of different bits of information that they are trading in, or sort of hawking, expecting someone to bite. PR agencies, of course, have made this a bit tricky because in some of the cases they will um, um, compensate. I think a number of these bloggers, in a way of saying, we might not really call it that, but I'll say it for what it is. I don't particularly like that approach personally. I think I made that clear in both, quiet rooms of a handful of people and public stages like this. Is not the first time I'm saying that, because I think it sets the wrong incentives, right? And it's something where we have to be really delicate around in general. So I'd say with bloggers, my view is that we want to really monitor for whether it is authentic engagement, meaning, yes, they're speaking on this issue. Is it resonating and is it pulling people along? Is it leading to us getting some different sort of mentions and queries and material customer related feedback here? Or is it sort of blowing over and sort of it's achieved its peak, it's going through its trough, and it's sort of like subsiding? And then, of course, one of the things, at least for us, that gives us an advantage as Nendo is we can go out to the ground, right? Offline, off screens, to just confirm, was this just a passing cloud, or is this a material issue that we now need to address head on or directly as the brand? Sometimes the brand doesn't want to speak. That's why they make the sort of the settlement behind the scenes to make the situation go away. Sometimes the brand has their hands tied because your risk or legal team will tell you that we had this matter in court. We can't really speak on it, but we now have the other side of the story being publicly spoken of in the court of public opinion to sort of sway the view on the institution. And then there's a lot of people who traffic in conspiracy theories and rumors. And some of those come from, like I said, a low trust environment where I will believe the rumor because I just have my suspicions about that institution. And it feels better psychologically for me to hold this belief than to believe what the institution is actually telling me. And then there's also the issue where some of the bloggers, I don't even like the word bloggers, by the way, in particular, because I was part of founding what's called the Bloggers Association of Kenya. I think bloggers are great people. I think it's a broad label that's been used and also abused in some ways. But I hope I've answered this, David, and I'm happy to sort of speak again. And thanks for that, Ruthie. Let me pick up the pace a bit. So in terms of triggers, I think here, bad customer experience, employee misconduct, product or safety issues, and then third-party scandals, what we call guilty by association. And you then have, again, just this so many suspicions, right, around banking, around finance, and so on. So if you get practical for a bit here with how things sort of like build up, you have sometimes it just starting as a post or something being published. You do have some people who then may be looking to score points, meaning they see this as a content and attention opportunity. What you have to understand with how some of the platforms work in terms of compensation is they pay you for engagement and attention, not for facts or truthfulness. And so some people will deliberately slightly misrepresent something, right? So let's say I have a video. In that video, someone uses the number 3. I'll deliberately say 4. Some people do this. I'll deliberately say 4, knowing you're going to come and correct me in the comments, say, you got it wrong, it's 3. And somebody's like, yep, that's money in the bank for me, right? I've seen before where a couple, in fact, a slightly more high profile blogger, if you may, had published some information about a Kenyan brand, and people came to the comments to say, hey, this is not true. We debunked this months ago. This has been covered. It's not authentic. It's not real. And then a few people came and say, hey, this brother is just looking for some money from X. He's looking for me. He's looking to raise his Twitter check. He's low on his impressions. You need to reach a certain number of impressions to qualify for a check. That's what he's doing. So as you guys are coming to correct him, as you're coming to sort of set the record straight, somebody's incentives are not necessarily aligned, right? And so the narrative is now being driven what we call inauthentically, but still in a coordinated way, rather than organically, because people are actively materially dissatisfied. What I find brands make a big mistake on is that they seem to think, somebody has been paid to say this about us. Sometimes people are just upset. They're just upset. You need to wake up and wisen up to that. And when you do, that's actually where the beginning of some changes and adjustments happen. Some people have product issues that when they get called out publicly, they want to make this go away because in truth, it's not that easy to fix the product issue. It's a material issue, but those are some of the challenges there. Now, I think if we could sum up all that we have, I think, on a page before I give you the framework for the playbook and end with our discussion on AI, I'd say that we find there's a real struggle in how quickly people respond or act. So for us, the first 48 hours, sometimes the first 24 hours, are really crucial. Somebody said when we did the Menti earlier that just this aspect of being able to reply, just to reply, meaning I am not acknowledging plus or minus that this happened or the legitimacy. I'm saying that I've seen this and we're looking into this. Some people take a long time to issue that. And so the longer you take to issue that, sometimes the more the rumor mill will really get grinding. And that, nature abhors a vacuum. That vacuum of information from the brand can be filled in with information that's inaccurate or incomplete. And certainly that can end up being harmful or difficult to remove. Then secondly, I think we have a number of ways we're expecting to just engage people, escalate to the next most human way of interacting. Yes, they wrote a Facebook post about us. Yes, they recorded a TikTok about us. Can I call you? Can I choose to come see you? Can I have somebody senior give you a call? This diffuses and deflates some of that tension and aggression. And sometimes people, as I'll show you, have probably come in private already. They just had a challenge that then spilled over into the public domain as well. And then we think this aspect of monitoring more kinds of mentions is one of the biggest, again, mistakes and challenges that brands make. They are looking at any time people are mentioning them, but not any time people are speaking about them. And the example I'll give is if I only responded, which is true. If I could only hear when people say then my name is Mark, right? So if I could only hear people say the name Mark, that'd be the equivalent for me of what I call monitoring, right? I hear that and I respond. If people say at and then the name or the handle of your organization, and you're responding to those, you're doing a decent job. God bless your heart, right? That's not easy work on its own. But there is what we call listening, and listening is super important for crisis. Listening means I listen to any and all mentions of my products, my services, and I'll show an example of that. And then, yes, we're talking about a public reply, some private resolution, and then to try to come back for public closure. It doesn't mean the issue will go away. It just means that's the part of the equation that you can control. So let's talk briefly about preparation. These are a couple examples of two what we call unbranded comments. So you see here mentioning Safaricom, mentioning Safcon. These are some of the nicknames people will use. And so you just have to be wary of this because branded mentions would be like at Safaricom PLC or at Safaricom _care. So what we say monitoring mentions is not social media listening. So, but people call them one and the same. And so it takes some work, discipline, and detail to really do both. And that comes with what Nendo we call unbranded mentions. And we have a formula and a structure and a framework for mapping as many of these, hundreds, if not, sometimes thousands of them, just related to you. And sometimes it's a way we can actually use AI to do this. But it starts off by really being attentive and observant, talking to different colleagues from different places. We start with the brand, where you have brand names, handles, senior leaders, first names, last names, spellings, misspellings. That's the brand side. You get to products, you have products, competitors, alternatives, nicknames for services, shorthand. There's different phrases people will use. You want to have those all in there because you'd much rather have a larger pipe coming into your social media listening software, and then you segment, and then you categorize, and then you train, because that's then where you can set certain rules, where then if things spike, but I can't see it because people are not tagging me, I am not getting caught by surprise. I am not getting the WhatsApp screenshot being asked, what are we doing about this? When it comes to response, this is one of, I guess, our most famous slides, I think, at Nendo, is when people come in private, and they almost always do. Sometimes they don't want smoke. They don't want to bring their business in public. They'll call you, they'll email you, they'll DM you, they'll inbox you, etc. They want an answer. They want a resolution. But because their expectations are going up, and because it is harder for people to maintain timely responses, and that's staying the same or going down, scammers now tend to come and find them, particularly when they come online and they want an audience. So they'll come in public, or they'll talk about you without mentioning it. And they'll record TikToks about you and the experience of you. So here they're looking for an audience. They don't just want you to respond. You had your time to respond in private. And so the motivations are different. So the ways that you escalate or de-escalate are different as well. Here you're just trying to, close tickets and respond in a timely way and manage expectations. And then here you're trying to engage publicly to show people you're aware, and then privately to seek to resolve the matter. But this here, when not understood, really leads to a lot of pain, difficulty, challenges, and unforced errors as well. I will say, though, that something for us is that we need to think about the big picture when we are finding ways to respond. One of the ways we do that is is you shouldn't only think about what we call the engagers. And I'll give a quick example here. Engagers are the smallest audience you have because they're a subset of your followers, which are a subset of all potential buyers or all your stakeholders. So sometimes you need expert advice for this part, but sometimes getting a media buy, a digital media buy, to help set the record straight might help. You can have responded, but as they say, the lie travels around the world faster than the truth can get out of bed and put on its pants, right? And what that says is that you can actually respond in a timely way and debunk the information and address it comprehensively. But the same people who saw and are spreading the information don't see this response. If they visit your page, which is a certain type of person who would come and visit, they would see that and know, oh, this is untrue. But for this larger court of public opinion, there's that. And this is just a quick example we like to use where we talk about some data from the UK on a chocolate brand, how the biggest audience are what we call non-buyers. So non-buyers, you're trying to get non-buyers where your potential buyers to buy once. If you're in, say, the fast-moving consumer goods space, this is a truism. Loyalty, this is probably a webinar for another time, but loyalty has some lies baked into it, right, that are inaccurate about what generates long-term sales and profit. I'm ready to fight about it in the comments, but I'll say that just as a reference to there are challenges to understanding this concept. So all that I'm trying to pass here is that you have people who engage with you as the biggest part of your audience. Somebody who liked your page in 2010, and somebody who followed you in 2015, and somebody who saw some of your ads in 2019 or 2021. So they will be here. But there are many other people who might interact with you who don't actually materially follow or interact directly with you. You want to make sure that they have the record straight, and that's where sometimes your offline research helps, just so that you don't overblow an online situation and take it out of proportion and go, with a shotgun chasing after a fly or mosquito. Even though, of course, it could be a really serious issue. It's just in aggregate, you might be wise to see how best to get good counsel in how you interact. And in some rare cases, if the larger public is being affected with this narrative, media buying might be wise for you. And we've seen some nonprofits, philanthropies, many different organizations attempt this, and we've seen some good examples of that as well. I'll take one quick example here, which you'll see. I'm going to skip it for time, but it's just a couple frameworks to help you with developing some of these statements in advance, which again, like we've said, is easier said than done, but it's helpful to do. So as we bring this into a close and talk through this, I'll say you might have heard of something called the Cobra effect, or which is that if a measure becomes a target, right, it can end up not being a very effective measure. Basically, my one thing I'll say with this is don't pay people, my opinion, my professional opinion, don't pay people to have positive conversations about you. Many more brands than would ever admit it are doing this right now. And it tends to be, for me, not a great use of funds. I think there are more creative ways to use it. But this idea that we're propping up our mentions with people who have good things to say, because management need to see positive sentiment growing, is, like I said, a bit of it's a challenge in my opinion, right? The story goes in British, sort of in India in the colonial times, they wanted to reduce the cobra population. So they put a cash reward saying, yeah, we'll pay for every dead cobra. People started creating cobra farms, right? So there's people who clearly sell you positive engagement, but it doesn't materially, at least in our estimation, doesn't always materially mean that people are looking at you warmly or kindly. And you'd be better served trying to address some of the material issues that are there as well. I'd say we have, again, you'll forgive me, these are just some stats, many of which you can look at just after this. I'm conscious of time, but I'd asked a couple of you if you'd stick around just a little longer as we close. So let me end a little bit with learning before I give you the AI closeout and the guide that we'd mentioned that we prepared for you today. So this is just this view that, like, training is something persistent to have. And we encourage at least even the short, sharp virtual training, or what we call asynchronous, like training you can watch anytime, any place. And then you have, if depending on your risk, you might want to do at least one a year or at least one a quarter for different crisis simulations or reflections. Hey, this last quarter we had 3 crises. Here's what we learned. Here's what we'll do differently. And then when you develop your playbook, part of that is actually saying that you're updating the playbook and guidance so that new people can be trained on it. So I want to briefly introduce the MELTS framework. This is just our way that we're able to give you and your institution a score um, based on the level of risk you have, based on the level of preparedness you have, and based on the level of maturity, right? Like we said, if you're selling, if you're a ride-hailing company, there's be high transaction volume and very easy for the customer to switch. If you're a bank, that's high friction, high switching costs. And also you can end up getting some big accusations, allegations, and a sensitivity when money is lost. And then of course, if you are different, just levels, it'll matter differently. So the first one, like we've said, is earlier just now, is you don't just want to do monitoring, you want to do what we call meaningful monitoring, which means you're looking at some of those extra keywords. You want to be talking and interacting with your colleagues early and often to set expectations. And then you want to be looking at your competitors as well and listening to some of your customers too. And this will include some media monitoring. It could be mainstream. For some of you said mainstream is your one of the challenges. And then there's knowing in advance, how do I interact with risk or legal, corporate affairs, regulatory affairs, different teams or departments. And then lastly is just the practice of not having the game plan, but not being ready to execute or ready to spring into action. And so we're gonna put this in the chat. So maybe Ruthie, if you don't mind, we'll just put the link to this. It's a Google form. I don't want to stay too long here, but you're welcome to scan it. So I can actually put this in the chat very quickly because I do know we might have a handful of questions as well. I'm gonna set this to everyone and just share the Google form so that those of you who are interested to use it can do that. And yeah, we'll also email it to you, everyone who RSVP'd for this. But essentially, you can take a series of 5 questions and we'll use that to calculate a score for you. The score will have some recommendations for you. It's a very simple Google form, but expect to hear from us a bit more after this because we'll be able to learn a bit more about your industry and your organization. So that's it in terms of the material that we prepared today. We'll do a quick pulse check. If you're still with me in the chat, we'll answer a couple of questions. Ruthie's going to clue me in just now. But today you've gotten some of the trends and insights that we're learning from. You're welcome to take these into sort of like a conversation with us, an advanced conversation, or we can even get to the point where we'll discuss a potential audit for your organization or a 90-day roadmap of threats, opportunities, and quick wins. And then we can do deeper dive work with you as well. Now, let me end with the AI bit. So AI, buzzword of the year. ChatGPT, probably every time I look on Google Trends and I look what Kenyans are searching for, this is the one they use the most by far, by a very long margin. I would say DeepSeek, I believe, might be second in place, and then Claude, and then Perplexity is a lot lower. But these are some of the different platforms that are there. At Nendo, we've invested in next to all of them, with the exception of DeepSeek, but we use all of them, try them all. This is the more interesting place for me, if you don't mind, because this is what I call the AI that your CIO or your chief information officer, chief technical officer, head of IT has already paid for. So there's likely Gemini if you're on Google Workspace. There's Copilot if you're on Office 365, and they actually do a lot. They tend to be underrated or underestimated or underutilized, but they are very valuable and continually getting better. They're not perfect. I would say Gemini has a pretty of a distinct lead over Copilot right now, but Microsoft's doing some interesting things, and we'll see whether they roll them out. Copilot plays very nice with proprietary sort of like data, like internal facing data. And then some of you are using Zoho now. So Zoho has their own, it's called Zia. And then we have Grok and Meta AI. I want to show a little bit on Grok. Now, what are some of the ways that people are using AI, at least even for us at Nendo? One is tracking what's called answer engines or generative engines. So previously, people would search for you and search for a question and see your product or service, or they go on social media and see responses from people. Now they'll ask ChatGPT, they'll ask Perplexity, and so you'll find that there's sort of like a new type of market share, which is what we'd call like almost like share of AI model. And so in there's the chance to actually like see your level of visibility and see if it's picking up on negative information as well, which I'll show you a quick example with Grok. And then here you have examples of how you can use it to test. So here you're seeing it to test creative. What we're going to share with you can test your messaging before before you actually share it, right? And I guess I'll load that here in the background, and then we'll come to it in just a bit. And this is just a public artifact that I had made using Claude, but we'll share that, and I'll explain a bit what it does. So for Grok, some quick examples. This is the president who uploaded a document, which is what a lot of brands do when they're apologizing or they're speaking in a crisis. They don't give a statement; they upload a signed document. And so Grok here, in this case, is able to read, summarize, and even fact check. So it fact checks leaders, it fact checks anyone, and it looks to what the public are saying, in which case it can also pass or spread misinformation. So you see here, just again, people are sharing this information, asking for an audience, asking for interaction, asking for responses. And you see in some of these cases that there are particular ways that Grok is being used. Now, some people don't like this. They really despise Grok. Grok is also the most unhinged of all of them and the least brand safe, if you ask me. But it is a popular one, and more Kenyans, at least those on X, are actually using it as well. I'll end with this. We have a special offer available for you this side of the year for our 2025-2026 training. We actually have a couple of you who've actually been through this course yourselves. And so it covers trends. It's a full one-day program that brings 3 different teams that don't sit together very often: marketing, customer experience, and corporate comms. And we're basically offering a special discount if you book by the end of next month or by the end of November. And yeah, so booking, we have our terms here around that, but that's our special offer for you available. And last time we did this, a number of people took it up, and I think they could even speak if they're in the chat and happy to. So I think that's probably it for like our material. I know that yeah, I think that should be it. I know we have a couple questions. I want to say that I'll be here, happy to answer as many as you might have time for. But again, the desire, just sort of wrapping up in terms of today, was one, understanding that Gen Z are some of the most camera ready, vertical video first audiences, and look at content creator as a vocation. Means you have staff and employees who you can actually mobilize, and you also have potential. Oh, thank you, Molly. I mean, yeah, we need. Let me just go back there. Thank you. So you have basically different types of colleagues there. So that was one, is understanding the motivations that ever since the government began, certain repressions on activism, that same activism is there. It's lying latent and is being addressed towards brands and institutions and nonprofits and philanthropies and companies and public sector. And so that's where it's actually directed to. That's why you have more people mobilizing against brands. And this is basically creating more reputational issues for brands, where people even know that I don't know if it's the truth or not. I just know I have to take the side of the individual as my form of digital activism. So that creates, again, more crises. Talked about responding twice publicly. We've talked about ways to de-escalate, and we've talked about different ways to engage and interact internally. So that's a couple of the ways that we are making this clear and available for you. I want to leave this up, and I will. This here is called, you'll get it in a text format, but it's basically like it's like a long JSON file, which is a long phrase that just says that it's instructions that you can put into any of these AI platforms. So you can put this into, let me just go back a few. You can put it into which one? Into any of these that you actually work with, and it should be able to pick out certain bits of information. It's supposed to serve as a mixture of legal and risk and customer experience and corporate comms and marketing communications. And then it also plays this role of a management consultant, which is supposed to then help diagnose a situation. So it will ask you, what company are you from? What's the situation or the crisis you're trying to solve? Give me some helpful information and context, and then it can help you draft a response or reply. So what the instructions which we'll share is that we'll send this to you branded on Nendo's template, but basically you will drop this into whatever your AI large language model of choice is, and it should begin by asking you some clarifying questions. And then from there, it will then start to respond to your situation and role play performing certain bits of checks and balances to help you feel like you've got a companion who is running information through different people. So when you go as the human to take the information upstream, you have a bit of basically support. It is in beta. So we've tested it, tried it out. Like I said, we have something else on the GPT store we'll share with you to try out too. But the view here is basically that, yeah, we have that as a way that you can consider to have a guide or move away from just ChatGPT in general to a very focused prompt that helps ChatGPT get very precise about, I'm in the middle of a crisis, there's a certain bit of help I need, and it's going to basically equip me in that way before, say, I call Nendo or I call somebody externally to help me out. So again, thank you. I know you've stayed a little longer over our call. And yes, I saw Alex here has the question. And there might be a couple others. I'm not sure if there's others in the Q&A, but
You can start
I
with the Alex
see.
one, Mark.
Sure, perfect. All right. So Alex Mora asks, in a crisis situation, wouldn't sponsoring the sponsor? That is a great question. So Alex asks in the chat, in a crisis situation, wouldn't sponsoring the response appear inauthentic and feel unnatural to the public? I'll say yes and no. Yes, to the extent that on one hand, you have to be delicate in how you speak on the issue. And that's why I mentioned, let's see if I could take that slide back, that, so one of the challenges here is that if your engagers are the ones who are responding and a few of your followers are the ones that saw it, then if you take the lie or the misinfo and pay for it with media, you'll be basically doing the work of the misinformation folks by spreading the negative message. So you have to craft it in a particular way that it affirms where you stand without necessarily, and this way I guess you need a professional, without amplifying the misinformation. So in our experience, that's part of what can work. The mistake we see happen is that, let's say that the misinformation has had 10,000 impressions. We write a post, the post has 100 impressions. This is the truth. This is what everyone needs to know. We've responded in a timely way, but no one has seen it. So it's here. People will come visit. When they come, it's pinned on our profile. We have the information. So the question is, how do you split the difference here? My view is I'm not so much for the opinion that you pay for influencers to go and talk good things about you. I've mentioned that I find that to be a really dicey and slippery road, and I think that it has some challenges to it. So that's not necessarily my preference, but I do think that in some very rare cases, people will choose that, or I think it's actually part of the norm. I just don't think it's very helpful for their cause. But this, however, on the other hand, of finding a way to pass across what you want people to remember, what you want them to know about you, and reaching everyone might even just bring you to mind, even in a buying situation that's unrelated to the crisis. And so that's where I think, like I said, there was a caveat here, it might be wise for you. And it might be wise because this done authentically can actually have positive paybacks than a case where you've done everything right, but you can't force the algorithm to engage with the information, the information the same way it engaged with the misinformation. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Alex.
Mark, there is one more question.
Yes, please. Yeah, I know we've got a minute as well, and I know some
Yes.
people have to leave. So yeah, I think we have our contacts that we'll be sharing with you. Please feel free to reach out to Nendo. We have a number of resources we've prepared. Thank you, Alex, for confirming that. Yes, Ruthie.
Yeah, so the last question is, what about a WhatsApp that wait, I'm just looking. Yeah, how do you deal with a crisis that emanates from WhatsApp?
Yeah, I think that's Silole who asked that. So I think this one would have to sort of like talk through together. But for me, WhatsApp as a private, closed social network is really difficult because people have a lot of things they want to do. And because of WhatsApp's end-to-end encryption, it becomes very tough to do that. You can't track how far a forward has been spread. You can't track necessarily how many people in a group might have seen it and so on. You can, but that's not something I as a third party can actually see as an institution or as somebody who is investigating or following up after the matter. So things can start on WhatsApp, but I would say that provided your official platforms are are talking about the situation, not again to repeat the misinformation. Some cases, because the problem of this is that sometimes that's actually what the misinformation or disinformation actors want. They want you to take their lie and then pass their lie as you talk about the truth, because that's what they wanted. They wanted it to sort of be on equal footing, and for you in a way to implicitly endorse it and share it. So this way you have to be a bit sensitive about how you go about that work. In our experience, again, that's our view. So for WhatsApp, I'd say WhatsApp is pretty difficult, but I would say we're seeing interesting things happening with WhatsApp channels, which are somewhat lower effort, meaning fine, people might not necessarily sign up for them like crazy, but they are low effort to the degree that you can basically cross post from other meta platforms, that would be your Instagram or elsewhere, and particularly with visuals and with particular text that you can forward, it allows you to have a sort of official statement, because people can see when you forward information out of a channel. WhatsApp includes the actual link to the channel itself. So you can confirm that this came from the official institution, as opposed to it's information and we're sort of operating in a sinimina show, or it's me who's telling you world. So I hope I've answered Silole's question there. And obviously, I'd like to know more about WhatsApp for us to answer it in detail. I see that Peggy, you've asked this question on misinformation by influencers. So I'd put misinformation by influencers into a few different levels. There are what I call thumbs for hire. That's what we call them at Nendo, or some people call them keyboard warriors. Other people call them buzzers. These are people who just basically mass retweet things to get them to trend, right? And they are what I'd call equal opportunity offenders, which means that they don't care materially who is paying as long as someone is paying. And they will basically do everything it takes to get that screenshot that says we're trending, and then the job is done. And so for that, in some cases, they will, again, be working politically, right? They'll be working in some cases for brands, or they'll just be working in certain topics. But mainly, if you go to the trending topics today, you'll see particularly for hashtags, you'll see that there's a pro-government or an anti-government, and it's basically buzzers on either side, right? There's some who are aligned to the government, some who are not, and you basically have that. That same machinery then can get repurposed and reused in some cases for or against brands. So there are indeed some people on occasion who will mobilize these same online thumbs for hire, keyboard warriors, buzzers against a certain brand. And so, yeah, they'll essentially spread this information out to people. They're not originating content or information. They're mainly taking pre-established talking points and pre-established images and content, and then just sharing that and sharing it, trying to pump and spam the algorithm to where it gets to trend, at least somewhere like X. So our issue is, at least at Nendo, in terms of wisdom, is that you need to be wise about how you go about this view of engaging them, particularly these sort of like the buzzer types, because you might be at a corporate event, right? It's a launch, it's your quarterly earnings announcement, and you're like, no, but we need, the CEO said we need to be trending on Twitter, and it's like, okay, but at what cost? And is that what we necessarily want to do? And there can be some real deeper questions we have to look at, because that is what we call a vanity metric. It doesn't move the needle in any material way. And so you end up essentially paying this industrial complex to do the thing that can be weaponized against you at a moment's notice. The other side for influencers, I think, Peggy, for me, is that there are what broadly people refer to as bloggers. These are content creators who, on one hand, might have the sort of open inbox, hide my ID type of a relationship, where their audience says, I will come to you with a situation, allegation, mischaracterization or suspicion of some kind of a rumor, and I'll launder it through you, right? So instead of me going and sharing it where no one would have seen it, I'll go and put it like a carrot on a stick and say, I have something enticing about this corporate, right? This is happening, or you should ask them about this, or you need to tell your followers that this is happening, right? And so many times that type of work happens, and there are multiple bloggers, some who have websites and Telegram channels and mainly X accounts. And so it creates, again, multiple places where the misinformation is. And in some cases, my problem is the way that some of these content creators will approach these engagements is they will actually come before the story is published and say, I have this information, I'm prepared to leak it. do you want to make me an offer to kill the story? So that's an influencer or content creator coming and saying, I can put this in the public domain and I can actually get some thumbs for hire to then juice it up and make it trend. But I can, for an asking price of a couple 100,000 or 1 million shillings, I'll make it go away. It's always surprising to me the number of the types of figures some of these folks will actually ask for. My big issue is that some brands have actually paid those bounties, right? That's what I call it. It's a bit more of like a bounty type figure. And yeah, so you can argue, is that fair? Is that legitimate? I'm not here to sort of speak on that, but I tend to not necessarily stick to the view that that's something that you want to pay for. I think that could be a really dangerous precedent you set. And but there's many brands that actually go about that and do that regularly too. So yeah, so I'll stop there. I know we also need to release a number of you. We've gone 6-7 minutes over time, but Peggy, I think if you can confirm in the chat, I hope that answers your question pretty well. And again, we're really grateful to have you all here. I think we've yeah, my encouragement to you is to take I'll share it just now, which should be this link. I think I shared it already, but yeah, just if you want to take this, we will be reaching out to a couple of you. Yeah, once you've been through it with the institution to see what that might mean for you, you'll be getting this from us, which it's going to find out whether it's inside of Claude or Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT. And once it does that, it'll be able to pull on different bits of information when trying to help you solve. So if you have certain like protocols or bits of information inside your intranet, it'll try to pull those because I, as your external provider, I can give you great comms, I can give you good research, but I think AI sometimes can use the internal knowledge in interesting ways. And we're seeing that more and more with some of the clients and brands that we're working with for research, for marketing, for consulting, and certainly for crisis situations. So yeah, thank you again. Yeah, really appreciate you all for being here. We are not chasing you, but we are about to end the session. So yeah, really hoping that again that it has been maybe like drinking from a fire hose, but hopefully valuable. This offer, like we've said, is available. Ruthie has put her email, which is ruth@nendo or ruthie@nendo.co.ke, and you can reach out just to inquire about this. We are looking to help you by the time it's the end of the quarter. Something maybe interesting to say about this, we do some really cool and interesting exercises with teams. We do, I know one of them is around tone of voice. And do you want to be sort of like Sheng or slang or informal, or do you want to be formal and English and prim and proper? Sometimes deciding that and knowing for sure, you find marketing is talking in this way, but customer experience is some people are being punished or going through challenges for speaking through that. Yes, I think thank you, Linda, for the ask. We'll share the training package on email. I think we have everyone's email, so we can expect to do that. Thank you for asking. And then thank you, Sheila, and thank you, everybody. Yes, I think that should probably be it from us, and happy to happy to end things there unless there's any final thoughts. Yes. Thank you, Ezekiel. Asante sana. Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us. Really happy to have you today, and thank you for your time. And thank you to my teammates for the support with the slides, the content, the research, the insights, and the preparation to get a lot of you in here in the first place. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to us at Nendo. Happy to speak back to you, and yeah, grateful for your time and attention today. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.